The argument erupts at 35,000 FT somewhere over the flat, indifferent geography of central Kansas. And it is the kind of argument that freezes an entire airplane cabin into horrified silence. United Airlines Flight 101, a Boeing 737-900ER operating the Denver to Washington Dulles route with 214 souls on board, has been airborne for 47 minutes when the woman in seat 2A rises from her chair with a force that rattles the overhead bin above her and points a manicured finger directly into the face of an elderly man in a wheelchair who has been painstakingly transferred into the window seat beside her. Her voice carries the particular pitch of a person who has never once in her life been told no and has absolutely no intention of hearing it today. "I don't care who you think you are," she announces to seat 2B, to the entire first-class cabin, to the universe at large. "That seat belongs to me. I paid for a window. I specifically requested a window, and whatever sob story your little entourage has cooked up is not my problem." The man she is speaking to does not raise his voice. He doesn't even fully raise his head. He is 73 years old and he weighs perhaps 140 lb, which is roughly 60 lb less than he weighed 18 months ago, when the oncologist in Denver handed him a piece of paper that changed every calculation of his remaining life. His name is Sergeant Major Raymond Adler, United States Army retired. He served 31 years in uniform across 3 decades and 4 combat theaters. He has been awarded the Purple Heart twice, the Bronze Star with Valor, and a combat infantryman badge that he keeps in a small velvet box on his nightstand because he finds it impossible to leave it behind even now. He is dying of stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And this specific flight, this window seat over the American heartland, is the last item on a list he made 3 months ago when his palliative care team told him, gently and professionally and with tremendous kindness, that he should begin thinking about what he still wanted to see. He wanted to see Washington, D.C. one more time. He wanted to see the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall, which he had visited once in 1987 and once in 2003, and promised himself he would visit a 3rd time. He wanted to read the names. He had friends on that wall. He wanted to sit for a while in that particular silence, but he is not going to explain any of that to the woman standing over him. That is not who Raymond Adler is. It is his son Marcus who stands up. Marcus Adler is 38 years old and he is seated in seat 2C in the aisle, where he positioned himself deliberately so that he could assist his father with any needs during the flight. He is a quiet man with his father's jaw and his father's posture and his father's habit of absolute stillness under pressure. He rises from his seat slowly, fully, and when he stands at his complete height of 6'2" in the narrow first-class aisle, the woman in seat 2A takes one involuntary half-step backward. Marcus does not raise his voice either. He does not threaten. He does not gesture. He simply looks at the woman with an expression that the flight attendant standing at the galley curtain will later describe to investigators as the calmest eyes I have ever seen on a human being in a conflict situation. And he says 4 words. "I need a moment." Those 4 words, delivered in that voice at that altitude, will set in motion a sequence of events that this woman, whose name is Deborah Fulton Nash, and who has filed 27 formal airline complaints in the past 4 years, will spend the remainder of her life wishing she could undo. To understand what is about to happen in the first-class cabin of Flight 101, you need to understand how these 2 very different human beings ended up in adjacent seats on this particular Tuesday morning in March, and why one of them carries in her carry-on bag a printed copy of her seat reservation, with the window highlighted in yellow marker, and why the other one carries a small velvet box and a letter from his oncologist that he keeps tucked in the front pocket of his shirt, directly over his heart. Deborah Fulton Nash is 51 years old, and she is precisely the kind of frequent flyer that airline customer service staff recognize by vocal cadence alone before they have finished pulling up the account. She lives in an 11,000 SQFT home in Cherry Hills Village, one of the wealthiest zip codes in the state of Colorado, and she holds United Airlines 1K status, which means she flies more than 100,000 miles per year, which means she has constructed an elaborate personal mythology around the privileges that status is supposed to confer. In the past 48 months, she has filed complaints against airlines, including United, American, Delta, and Southwest. She has complained about seatmates whose cologne she found offensive. She has complained about a flight attendant who, she alleged, failed to make sufficient eye contact while delivering her Chardonnay. She once submitted a formal written grievance against a gate agent who she claimed had smiled at her sarcastically. She has received 17 travel vouchers for upgrade certifications and 2 formal apologies from airline leadership that she keeps in a folder on her desktop labeled wins. She woke up at 5:45 on Tuesday morning to make this flight because she had a meeting in Washington that her assistant had described as moderately important, which in Deborah's hierarchy translated to non-negotiable. She had reserved seat 2A window, first-class bulkhead row 7 weeks in advance, because she considered the window seat non-negotiable on transcontinental flights. She required the window. She had printed confirmation of this requirement when she arrived at Denver International Airport that morning and processed through the premier access lane at security and walked to gate B42 with her rolling carry-on and her vanilla milk latte. She was already in the particular mood that her assistant privately recognized as pre-complaint ready. She arrived at the gate to find a small, remarkable scene already unfolding. A man in a motorized wheelchair, frail, thin, moving with the careful economy of someone managing significant pain, was being assisted by a gate agent and a tall, younger man who kept one hand consistently near the older man's shoulder without quite touching it, the way you hover near something precious and irreplaceable. An airline representative was speaking quietly to the tall man, and there was a manila envelope being exchanged, and there were nods, and there was paperwork. Deborah observed none of this with any particular interest because it had nothing to do with her. What she noticed was the seat assignment on the gate agent screen when she walked up to inquire about early boarding. She noticed, because she is the kind of person who notices these things, that seat 2A had been flagged with a special service notation. She asked what that meant. The agent smiled and explained gently that the airline had made a compassionate accommodation. A passenger with a serious medical condition had been assigned the window seat in row 2 as part of a medical assistance protocol. Deborah's seat assignment, the agent explained with continued gentleness, had been moved to seat 2B, the middle seat, and she had been provided a substantial travel credit as compensation. What followed at gate B42 lasted 11 minutes and involved 2 supervisors, one call to a United customer experience line and a threat to go straight to the CEO, whom I have met personally at a charity function. The supervisors explained the policy. They explained it again. They explained it a third time with a printed reference sheet. Deborah rejected the explanation 3 times, accepted the boarding pass for seat 2B once, and made absolutely clear that this conversation was far from over. On the jetway, walking down the telescoping corridor toward the aircraft door, she decided that the conversation was in fact going to continue on the plane. She decided specifically that once she saw who had been given her window seat and assessed the situation with her own eyes, she would make a personal appeal. She was very good at personal appeals. She had 27 formal complaint wins to prove it. Raymond Adler and his son Marcus were already seated when she boarded. The gate agent and a flight attendant named Carrie Okonkwo had coordinated his boarding with the care and attention that the situation required, helping transfer him from the aisle chair to the window seat 2A, positioning him near the window as he had requested. Because Raymond had asked specifically if he could see out the window during flight, and everyone involved had understood without any additional explanation why that mattered. He was wearing his army dress uniform jacket over a white shirt, not because he wanted attention, but because Marcus had suggested it, and Raymond had agreed that the jacket felt right for a trip like this one. The 2 rows of medals on the left breast of that jacket caught the cabin light. When Deborah Fulton stopped at the row and looked down at him for the first time, she looked at the medals. She looked at the window. She looked at the middle seat. And then she said, "Excuse me, I think there's been a mistake." Raymond looked up at her. He said, "I don't believe there has." Carrie Okonkwo, who had been 3 steps away and turned at the voice, recognized immediately what she was looking at. She stepped forward. She explained for the 4th time that morning that a compassionate seat accommodation had been arranged for this passenger, that Deborah's new seat assignment was confirmed, and that the travel credit applied to her account was substantial. She said all of this professionally, firmly, and without a single escalating word. Deborah sat down in seat 2B with the compressed silence of a person who has decided to conduct a full tactical reassessment before launching the next offensive. She spent 12 minutes on her phone. She opened her United app. She composed and sent a message to a customer service line. Then the door closed, the jetway retracted. and Flight 101 began its pushback from Gate B42. And whatever resolution Deborah Fulton was hoping to receive from customer service was going to have to wait, because at 35,000 FT there is no one to call, so she decided to handle it herself. The first sign that Carrie Okonkwo was going to have a complicated flight came approximately 4 minutes after the fasten seatbelt sign extinguished, when Deborah pressed the call button with the flat of her palm and demanded to speak with the head flight attendant. The senior flight attendant on United 101 that morning was a 22-year veteran named James Thorpe, who had handled in-flight medical emergencies, passenger deaths, diversions, brawls, bomb threats, and one memorable occasion involving a professional athlete and a bottle of whiskey. He walked up the aisle from the galley with the measured pace of a man who has seen everything and is genuinely curious what this is going to be. Deborah informed him that she required the window seat on medical grounds. She suffered, she said, from a condition that made middle seats untenable, a condition that she was prepared to document if necessary, and that she expected the airline to accommodate. James asked what the condition was. Deborah said it was a private medical matter. James said he understood, but that the current seat assignment had been made based on a filed medical accommodation request that could not be overridden mid-flight. Deborah said she was filing a counter request. James said counter requests were processed on the ground. Deborah said that was unacceptable. James said he was sorry she felt that way. Deborah said that wasn't good enough. This exchange lasted 6 minutes. Carrie counted. At minute 8, Deborah turned directly to Raymond Adler and said, "I'm sure you can understand my position. I reserved this seat months ago. I'm not trying to be difficult. I just think you'd be more comfortable in the middle anyway. The window gets cold," Raymond said quietly. "I'm all right with cold." At minute 12, Deborah flagged Carrie and said she wanted to escalate to the pilot. Carrie explained that the pilots were occupied with operating the aircraft. Deborah said she was a Platinum Plus Premier 1K member. Carrie pointed out with exceptional calm that pilot rank superseded frequent flyer status. 2 passengers in row 3, a married couple returning from a ski trip, exchanged a look. A man in row 4 put his earbuds in with the deliberate, pointed energy of someone making a statement. At minute 21, Deborah stood up. She stood up and she turned to face Raymond Adler fully. And this is the moment that the passenger in seat 3A, a woman named Dr. Patricia Swain, who had been watching the entire situation unfold over the rim of her reading glasses and recording video on her phone since approximately minute 6, later described as the moment the temperature in the whole cabin changed. Deborah said, in a voice that she may have intended to be low, but which carried with perfect clarity to at least the first 6 rows of the aircraft, "I don't know what your situation is, but whatever it is, it doesn't give you the right to take what belongs to someone else. I worked for this seat. I earned it. And if you think I'm just going to sit here for 4 hours in the middle seat because someone decided your feelings matter more than my rights, then you have made a serious miscalculation about who you are dealing with." Raymond Adler was quiet for a moment. The engine hum filled the silence. Somewhere in the rows behind them, a baby had been sleeping and now stirred. And then Raymond said, with the perfect levelness of a man who has been under fire in 2 separate decades, "I'm not going anywhere, ma'am." Deborah's face did something complicated, and Marcus Adler stood up. When Marcus stood up in that aisle, several things happened simultaneously. Carrie Okonkwo took 3 rapid steps forward from the galley. James Thorpe, who had retreated to monitor the situation from a professional distance, began moving up the aisle with purpose. The couple in row 3 sat forward. Dr. Patricia Swain adjusted her phone angle, and the passenger in seat 4B, a man who had been asleep under a travel blanket, opened his eyes, looked at the aisle, assessed the situation, and reached into his jacket pocket for a different kind of identification entirely. But Marcus didn't need any of that yet. Marcus looked at Deborah Fulton Nash with those absolutely calm eyes and said, "Ma'am, my father is a retired sergeant major of the United States Army. He served 31 years. He has been awarded the Purple Heart twice. He has stage 4 pancreatic cancer and a life expectancy of 8 to 12 weeks. This flight is his last trip. That window is the last window he asked to see out of. I am asking you one time respectfully to please sit down." The first-class cabin of the Boeing 737-900ER holds 16 passengers in 4 rows of paired seats. In the silence that followed Marcus's words, all 15 other first-class passengers were listening. Every one of them. Deborah said, "That's a very moving story, and I'm sorry about your father's health. But that doesn't actually give him the legal right to my seat." And that is when the man in seat 4B stood up too. He moved with the compact economy of someone trained to move efficiently in tight spaces. And he reached into his jacket and produced a credential wallet that he opened and held at eye level, where both Deborah and, critically, James Thorpe could read it clearly. His name was Special Agent David Kroll, and he was a federal air marshal operating in plain clothes on United Flight 101 as part of standard TSA Federal Air Marshal Service Deployment Protocol. And the badge he was holding was absolutely, unambiguously, and federally real. He said in that terse, flat voice that federal air marshals apparently receive as standard issue along with their sidearm, "Ma'am, I need you to sit down and remain in your assigned seat. This is your one advisement. The cabin pressure in a commercial aircraft at 35,000 FT is maintained at the equivalent of approximately 8,000 FT of altitude, which means the air is thin, which means sounds carry differently, which means every breath feels slightly more conscious than it does on the ground. In that thinned air, in that carried sound, Deborah Fulton heard the word advisement and appeared for the first time all morning to understand that the situation had developed a gravity that her United app could not resolve. She sat down, but she was not done. The next 20 minutes were what aviation incident reports describe as a sustained cabin disturbance, which is the technical and professional language for what was, in human terms, a woman systematically dismantling her own future in real time. Deborah did not scream. She did not use physical force. What she did was conduct a relentless, hissing, furious campaign of whispered threats, elbow encroachments, pointed sighs, and call button activations that Carrie Okonkwo later counted at 11 separate incidents in 23 minutes. She told Carrie that she was going to own this airline. She told James Thorpe that she had a lawyer who had successfully sued the FAA. She turned to Raymond Adler and made a comment just above a whisper, just below deniability, about people who play the sick card. She elbowed the armrest in a way that wasn't quite an assault, but was clearly a message. She filmed Raymond on her phone, which is a direct violation of United Airlines passenger policies, and which Dr. Patricia Swain, who was still filming from row 3, captured in its entirety. Marcus watched all of this from his aisle seat with his hands folded in his lap, because he had made a decision at some point in the last hour that this woman's behavior was not going to steal 1 second of this flight from his father. Every few minutes he would lean slightly toward Raymond and they would exchange a few quiet words. Once Raymond pointed at something out the window, they were crossing the Missouri River, and Marcus leaned over to look. A passenger in row 3 who saw this later told a reporter that it was the most devastating thing she had witnessed in years. This father and son looking out a window together at a country the father was saying goodbye to. Then Deborah made her catastrophic mistake. In the 37th minute of the flight, in the particular frustration of someone who has been contained and knows it and cannot bear it, Deborah Fulton leaned across the armrest and said to Raymond Adler clearly, audibly, witnessed by Special Agent Kroll and both flight attendants and 4 passengers, "You know what you people do? You make up these stories to get what you want." Sympathy plays. I've seen it 100 times, and frankly, I don't believe a word of it. I think you're a fraud, and I think this whole thing is a setup. Raymond Adler turned and looked at her for a long moment. He didn't say anything. He reached into the front pocket of his shirt, and he removed the folded letter that his palliative care physician at the University of Colorado Cancer Center had written 3 weeks ago, and he held it out toward her without opening it. He said, "You don't have to read it." He said it with such absolute quiet dignity that James Thorpe, watching from the galley curtain, had to look away. Special Agent Kroll was already on his feet. But something else was also happening, because Marcus Adler had taken out his own wallet, and from it he had removed not a credit card, not a driver's license, but a credential badge of his own. And he placed it on the tray table in front of him with a small, careful, final click, and he looked at Deborah Fulton Nash and he said, "My name is Marcus Adler. I am the Deputy Inspector General for Aviation Safety at the United States Department of Transportation. I hold a direct appointment under the Secretary of Transportation. I regulate, among other things, the enforcement division that oversees airline compliance with FAA passenger accommodation policies." He paused. "The policies you have now violated 6 times in the last 37 minutes. The silence that followed was the kind that air itself seems to thicken into. Deborah looked at the badge. She looked at Special Agent Kroll's badge. She looked at Carrie Okonkwo, who had her company incident log open on the aircraft tablet and had been documenting since minute 1. She looked at Dr. Patricia Swain in row 3, who had quietly lowered her phone because the recording had, by that point, captured everything it needed to capture. She said, "I want to speak to a lawyer." Marcus said, "You'll have that opportunity." He picked up the aircraft phone handset mounted to the seat unit and asked Carrie to connect him to the flight deck. Captain Michelle Vance, who had been receiving updates from James Thorpe via intercom for the past 20 minutes, answered on the second ring. Marcus identified himself by name and title and federal appointment number, all of which Captain Vance had been trained to verify, and all of which he confirmed on the call. He explained the nature of the ongoing disruption. He referenced Federal Aviation Regulation 14 CFR, Part 91.11, which prohibits interference with flight crew members, and which applies to any crew member instruction, which Carrie Okonkwo's instructions qualified as. He noted the involvement of Special Agent Kroll and the documented record of incidents. And then he said, with the same calm his father had passed to him across 38 years, "Captain, I'm going to leave the disposition of this situation to your discretion. I just want to make sure you have full information." Captain Vance's voice over the handset was the professional calm of 18 years of commercial aviation. She said, "I have full information." "Thank you, Mr. Adler." She paused. "Please tell your father we're honored to have him on this flight." She made an announcement 30 seconds later. The aircraft intercom activated with its familiar 3-tone chime, and Captain Vance's voice filled the cabin from bulkhead to tail. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Vance. I want to address a situation in the forward cabin. We have with us today a United States Army Sergeant Major, a decorated combat veteran, who is making a personal journey of significance to Washington, D.C. It is my honor, and the honor of this crew, to be part of that journey. I also want to advise all passengers that federal regulations protecting crew instructions and passenger accommodations are in full effect on this flight, and that any behavior constituting interference or harassment will result in law enforcement contact upon landing. We expect the remainder of our flight to reflect the respect and dignity our passengers deserve. Thank you." The first-class cabin erupted, not in chaos, in applause. It started in row 3 with Dr. Patricia Swain and spread backward through the cabin like a wave finding its shape. And when it reached the coach cabin, in the rows behind the curtain where passengers had been hearing the tension transmitted through aluminum and air pressure and the particular osmosis of 200 people sharing a sealed metal tube, the applause came there too, and the cabin crew, all 4 of them, stood at their positions and let it happen. And James Thorpe, in 22 years of aviation, said later that he had never heard anything quite like it. Raymond Adler looked out his window at the American countryside 35,000 FT below him and said nothing. Marcus put his hand on his father's arm. Deborah Fulton Nash sat in the middle seat with the particular stillness of a person who has finally, completely and irreversibly understood the thing she should have understood hours ago. Special Agent Kroll remained standing in the aisle, not aggressively, just present, just a reminder of exactly what kind of morning this had turned into. The remaining 2 hours and 11 minutes of Flight 101 were, by all subsequent accounts, among the quietest and most extraordinary that any member of that crew had ever worked. James Thorpe brought Raymond Adler a glass of sparkling water without being asked. Carrie Okonkwo arranged for the meal service to come to Raymond and Marcus first, and the meal she brought, Raymond had requested something light, came with a note card that 3 of the 4 flight attendants had signed, and one of the coach flight attendants had come forward specifically to sign as well. Passengers in row 3 passed forward a handwritten note. The couple from row 4 did the same. At some point in the second hour, without any announcement or coordination, a line of passengers from the coach cabin formed quietly near the curtain, and one by one flight attendants passed small notes forward, some written on napkins, some on the backs of boarding passes that said things like, "Thank you for your service and we're praying for you." And from one anonymous passenger in seat 22F, simply, "I see you." Marcus read these to his father one at a time, and Raymond listened to each one, and once or twice he nodded. Deborah Fulton did not speak again for the remainder of the flight. She stared at the seat back in front of her. At Denver International Airport, She had been a 1K Premier member with 27 complaint wins and a folder on her desktop labeled accordingly. At Dulles International, she was going to be a very different kind of statistic entirely. When Flight 101 landed at Dulles International Airport at 11:47 that Tuesday morning, two things happened at Gate C-17 that Deborah had not planned for when she woke up that morning. The first was that 3 agents from the Metropolitan Washington Airport's Authority police were waiting at the gate, alerted by Captain Vance's pre-landing coordination. The second was that a representative from United Airlines' Corporate Passenger Relations Office, who had been monitoring the situation via real-time crew reports and had been on the phone with the Department of Transportation's Aviation Division for the last 90 minutes, was also waiting with a tablet and an expression of pained professional urgency. Special Agent Kroll escorted Deborah Fulton off the aircraft first, which was its own kind of announcement to everyone watching. She was detained at the gate and questioned by both the airport authority officers and an FAA compliance officer who had been summoned by the DOT representative. The charges under consideration, which were documented and transmitted to Federal Aviation Enforcement before the remaining passengers had finished deplaning, included interference with a passenger medical accommodation filed under 49 CFR Part 382, interfering with crew member instruction under 14 CFR 91.11, and conduct disruptive to air carrier operations under 49 USC Section 46318, which carries a civil penalty of up to $25,000 per violation, 3 violations, 2 federal agents as witnesses, 11 documented incidents in the crew log, video footage from Dr. Patricia Swain's phone that had already, by the time the aircraft touched down, been forwarded to 3 separate email addresses at her attorney's instruction. Deborah asked for her lawyer 3 more times. Each time she was told she would have the opportunity to call. Each time the officer taking her statement made another note. United Airlines moved with the particular speed of a corporation that has assessed a public relations situation and made its calculations. Within 48 hours, Deborah Fulton's 1K status was suspended pending investigation. Within 72 hours following the review of the crew incident log, the Air Marshal's report, and the passenger video footage that Dr. Patricia Swain's attorney had transmitted to the airline's legal department, her account was terminated. Within 2 weeks, her name appeared on the airline's internal no-fly registry, which was shared as standard with the FAA Passenger Watchlist Coordination Office. Within a month, 2 additional airlines with reciprocal registry agreements had processed the same flag. Her folder on her desktop labeled wins now contained 27 entries. There would not be a 28th. The Department of Transportation, acting on the documented report filed by Raymond Adler in his official capacity, opened a formal compliance review of the incident and issued a public guidance update referencing Flight 101 as a case study in the application of the Compassionate Accommodation Policy under Part 382. Airlines across the industry received the guidance. 3 carriers updated their passenger handling training materials. The incident, which Dr. Patricia Swain posted to her social media channels at approximately 3 p.m. on Tuesday, the video edited, captioned, and shared with the file she had compiled since Row 3, accumulated 4 million views in the first 18 hours. Raymond Adler arrived at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall on Wednesday morning. It was overcast and cool the way Washington gets in early March, and the granite was dark with the overnight damp. Marcus walked beside him as he moved along the wall in his wheelchair, and Raymond stopped at panel 15W and found the name he had come to find. A friend, a private from Fresno who had died in 1969 at the age of 19, and he placed his hand on the cold black stone and held it there for a long time. Marcus stood beside him and said nothing, which was exactly right. The airline reached the Adler family by phone on Thursday. The vice president of customer experience expressed the airline's profound regret personally and offered a package of compensation that Raymond's daughter, a family attorney, later described as reflective of genuine understanding of what occurred. Raymond received a personal letter from the airline CEO. The flight crew of United 101 each received formal commendations from the DOT Aviation Office, the first time any of them had received a federal commendation for a service interaction, though James Thorpe said afterward that he could think of no crew that had more than earned it. Carrie Okonkwo framed hers. There is a reason that stories like this one find the audiences they find, and it is not only because they involve conflict and consequence, and the particular satisfaction of watching entitlement meet accountability at altitude. It is because they remind us of something we know, but sometimes forget in the friction of modern travel. That inside the sealed, pressurized tube of a commercial aircraft, stripped of exits and privacy and personal space, the only thing that separates civilization from chaos is the decision, made individually and collectively, to see the people around us as people. Raymond Adler had 31 years of service and 2 Purple Hearts and 8 to 12 weeks of life remaining, and what he asked for was a window seat in the sky. It was the smallest possible ask. It cost nothing to honor it. It cost Deborah Fulton everything not to, Marcus Adler. When a reporter from an aviation industry publication asked him 2 weeks later if he had planned from the beginning to invoke his DOT authority, was quiet for a moment in the particular way his father is quiet. Then he said, "I didn't want to get there. I wanted someone to do the right thing before we got there." He paused. "We just ran out of someone." Raymond Adler passed away 6 weeks after the flight, at home in Denver, with Marcus and his daughter beside him. At his memorial service, a flight attendant sent flowers. The card read, "For the man who showed us what it looks like to be at peace at $35,000 FT.